On a crisp winter morning, as families across Alabama and Florida welcomed the promise of a new year, one household was about to face a heartbreak no celebration could mend. What should have been a brief holiday visit between a father and his young children instead unfolded into a tense, weeks-long search, leaving a community reeling and authorities racing against time. Behind the quiet rural landscapes of Jasper, shadows of danger and neglect loomed where joy was meant to be, setting the stage for a tragedy that would shock a state and leave lasting questions about safety, responsibility, and the unseen risks that can hide in the most ordinary of homes. Under the glow of a new year that should have marked fresh beginnings, a quiet visit turned into a nightmare that crossed state lines and shattered a family beyond repair. What began as a routine holiday trip ended with unanswered questions and a 4-year-old boy gone. The child had traveled from Florida to Alabama to spend the new year with his father, a visit meant to be brief and ordinary. Instead, it became the last time anyone would see him alive. Days later, the search ended in the most devastating way possible. The boy was found dead, and the focus of the investigation shifted sharply to the person who should have been his first line of protection. His father, Jameson Boley, a 40-year-old man from Jasper, Alabama, was taken into custody as investigators pieced together the circumstances surrounding the child's disappearance. Court records from Walker County District Court reveal that Boley is now facing multiple felony charges. Prosecutors have charged him with felony chemical endangerment of a child, a serious offense that suggests the child was exposed to hazardous substances under his care. He is also charged with the unlawful manufacture of a destructive device, a charge that deepened concerns about the environment in which the boy had been living during the visit. As these charges emerged, the case shifted from a missing child investigation to a complex criminal inquiry, raising troubling questions about what happened behind closed doors during those final days. For authorities, this was no longer just about loss, but about accountability, intent, and the conditions that may have placed a vulnerable child in danger. This was only the beginning of what investigators would uncover, and as the legal process moved forward, the details surrounding the New Year's visit began to paint a far darker picture than anyone could have imagined. The alarm was raised on the very last day of the year. On December 31st, Jameson Boley's 4-year-old son, Johnathan Everett Boley, known to everyone in the family as John John, was reported missing. According to Walker County Sheriff Nick Smith, the boy had been playing outside with the family dog on a rural property along Highway 195 near Jasper, Alabama. At some point, he wandered away, and then he was gone. What followed was an urgent and expansive search effort. The quiet countryside was quickly flooded with activity as hundreds of law enforcement officers joined local volunteers. K-9 teams moved through dense undergrowth, drones scanned from above, and aircraft circled overhead. The search stretched across several square miles of rugged, wooded terrain, an unforgiving landscape that made every hour more critical. For days, hope clung to the smallest signs. Then, on January 2nd, about 2 miles from the home, search teams made a grim discovery. John John was found dead. Nearby, his dog was located alive, a detail that only deepened the mystery and heartbreak surrounding the case. Authorities have not released the cause of death. An autopsy was ordered, and investigators made it clear that their work was far from over. With more questions than answers, the focus turned fully to what had happened during the boy's final hours, and whether this tragedy was the result of misfortune, neglect, or something far more deliberate. As the investigation continued, the silence around how John John died became as haunting as the search itself, setting the stage for revelations that would soon place his father at the center of a growing criminal case. As the reality of the discovery settled in, officials struggled to put the moment into words. "This is not the outcome anyone hoped for," Sheriff Nick Smith told reporters. He spoke not only for law enforcement, but for the volunteers and residents who had spent days combing the woods, holding on to hope with every passing hour. He added that their hearts were with the family, and with everyone who had worked tirelessly to bring the child home alive. But as the investigation pressed on, an unsettling turn emerged. During a search of the home where John John had last been seen, authorities uncovered explosives. The discovery was serious enough that the search had to be halted immediately. What began as a missing child case now carried the weight of a potential federal threat. Because of the danger, the FBI was called in. Sheriff Smith confirmed that the Bureau's bomb squad took over that part of the operation. Their task was to secure and neutralize the explosives, making the property safe before investigators could resume their work inside the house. The presence of explosives raised new and troubling questions. It suggested that the environment surrounding the child in his final days was far from ordinary. As federal agents worked to stabilize the scene, investigators prepared to return, knowing that what they might find next could reshape the entire understanding of how a New Year's visit ended in tragedy. As investigators worked through the layers of the case, more context about the family situation came into focus. Authorities confirmed that Johnathan and his siblings normally lived with their mother in Florida. The trip to Alabama was part of a holiday visit, arranged under an existing custody agreement that allowed the children to spend time with their father during the festive period. What was meant to be a temporary reunion would instead become the center of a criminal investigation. Court records show that Jameson Boley was arrested while the search for his missing son was still underway. By the time John was found, Boley was already facing serious legal trouble. Prosecutors later confirmed that he now stands accused in 2 separate felony cases. In one of those cases, Boley is charged with 2 counts of chemical endangerment of a child, a felony offense under Alabama law. According to a criminal complaint, investigators allege that on or about December 31, 2025, Boley, identified in court documents as a responsible person, specifically the father, knowingly, recklessly, or intentionally caused or allowed 2 children, including Johnathan, to be exposed to methamphetamine. The complaint alleges that the children were placed in a situation where they could ingest, inhale, or come into direct contact with the illegal substance. These allegations shifted the case even further away from the narrative of a tragic accident, pointing instead to an environment of serious risk during the children's stay. As prosecutors laid out these charges, the questions surrounding John's final days grew heavier. The investigation was no longer focused only on how a child disappeared, but on what he may have been exposed to while under his father's care, and how those conditions could be connected to the devastating outcome that followed. The timeline of the tragedy became clearer with each revelation. Johnathan's disappearance on December 31 coincided, according to investigators, with the alleged exposure of him and his sibling to methamphetamine inside the home. While court records did not specify the quantity of methamphetamine found on the property, nor whether the children tested positive for the substance, the mere allegation underscored the level of danger within the household during the visit. Beyond the chemical endangerment charges, Boley faces a second, separate felony case. Court filings reveal he is charged with the unlawful manufacture of a destructive device. Investigators allege that Boley possessed precursor substances with the intent to unlawfully manufacture either a destructive device or a bacteriological weapon. Importantly, authorities emphasized that he had no legal authorization, state or federal, to handle such materials. Sheriff Smith made a careful distinction during a news conference. He stressed that the charge related to the destructive device is not connected to Johnathan's death. At this time, there is no evidence indicating foul play in the child's death, and these charges should not be conflated with the search for Johnathan, he said, highlighting the complexity of the unfolding case. The combination of allegations of chemical endangerment and possession of explosive materials painted a portrait of a household fraught with danger, raising urgent questions about how a brief holiday visit turned into a catastrophe that would haunt the family and the community long after the New Year celebrations had ended. As the legal proceedings began to take shape, the gravity of the charges against Boley became reflected in the courtroom decisions. Bond hearing records reveal that a Walker County District Judge ordered Boley to be held on cash-only bonds totaling $400,000, citing serious concerns about public safety. In the chemical endangerment case, the judge set bond at $100,000 cash, while in the destructive device case, bond was set significantly higher at $300,000 cash. The handwritten notes accompanying both bond orders underscored the court's view of the defendant, explicitly stating that Boley is a danger to the community. Boley remains in custody, his liberty restricted as the legal system prepares to examine the evidence against him. Court records indicate he was appointed a public defender to represent him, and he has formally requested preliminary hearings in both felony cases. The district judge granted those requests, scheduling the hearings for January 20th at the Walker County Courthouse Annex. With the hearings approaching, the case has taken on a procedural rhythm, yet the underlying tragedy, the loss of Johnathan and the alleged endangerment of his sibling, continues to cast a long shadow. The legal process promises to unravel more details about the events that led to the fatal outcome, as the community watches closely, grappling with a story that began as a simple holiday visit and ended in unimaginable loss and shocking revelations. Experts familiar with law enforcement procedures weighed in on the significance of the bond decisions. Former Fort Worth Police Chief and Genesee spokesperson Jeffrey Halstead noted that the cash-only bond amount set for Boley appeared consistent with the severity of the charges and the findings of the court. Setting a high cash bond, particularly after reviewing the defendant's financial status, often means the court expects the individual to remain in custody, Halstead explained. I've seen this many times in my career, and the amounts here appear reflective of the charges the suspect is facing. Halstead also highlighted the language used in the court orders, noting that they explicitly cite public safety concerns. When I reviewed the bond hearing order, it clearly states that the suspect is a danger to the community, he said. That is a standard and appropriate notation in cases involving allegations of this nature. His observations underscore how seriously the legal system treats cases that involve both potential harm to children and the possession of dangerous materials. The high cash bonds and the court's explicit concern for community safety signal the gravity of the situation, reflecting a judicial system attempting to balance due process with protection for those who could be at risk. As Boley awaits his preliminary hearings, set for January 20th, the case continues to draw attention, not only for the tragedy at its center, but also for the legal and societal implications surrounding child safety, chemical endangerment, and public risk. Even as the legal machinery moves forward, the human toll remains at the forefront. Authorities have emphasized that the investigation into Johnathan's death is far from complete. Every detail is being scrutinized, from the circumstances surrounding his disappearance to the environment in which he spent his final hours. Officials have promised that additional information will be released as it becomes available, signaling that the case may yet reveal more about the tragic events of that New Year's visit. At the same time, law enforcement has urged the public to respect the family's privacy. The loss of a child is a wound that cannot be measured in days or weeks, and the grieving process for Johnathan's loved ones is ongoing. In the midst of national attention, authorities have called for compassion and space, recognizing that behind the headlines and court filings, a family is attempting to navigate an unimaginable loss. The story of Johnathan Everett Boley, known affectionately as John John, serves as a grim reminder of how quickly a moment meant for celebration can spiral into tragedy, and how the consequences of danger and negligence can reverberate far beyond a single household. As the investigation continues, the community remains watchful, seeking both answers and closure in a case that has already shaken many to the core. The tragedy of Johnathan Everett Boley is a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the responsibility that comes with caring for a child. What should have been a simple New Year's visit turned into a devastating loss, exposing the profound consequences that neglect, unsafe environments, and poor decisions can have on the most vulnerable among us. For viewers, the take-home is clear. Safeguarding children requires vigilance, awareness, and accountability. Every caregiver must recognize the risks posed by hazardous substances, unsafe practices, or harmful behaviors in the home. Beyond individual responsibility, this case also underscores the importance of community support, timely intervention, and the role of law enforcement in protecting those who cannot protect themselves. While Johnathan's death cannot be undone, his story serves as a warning and a call to action. It compels us to prioritize the safety of children in every environment, to act decisively when danger is suspected, and to approach custody, supervision, and household safety with the seriousness they demand. Ultimately, the lesson is both simple and profound. The well-being of a child is a responsibility that must never be taken lightly, for the smallest oversight can carry irreversible consequences. Don't forget to subscribe for more chilling content and hit the notification bell to stay updated.